success is scary. On one hand, it's something that people want and they want to be successful, they want to make money, they want the company to grow. But when the company grows, it can be quite terrifying. So to have that support structure around you is incredibly important as you grow.
Leading and scaling a business isn't hard because you lack ideas. It's hard because your time, your team's time, and your focus get eaten alive by the daily grind. Too many leaders are overwhelmed, under pressure, and bogged down by low-leverage tasks. I've learned this the hard way, scaling Nobody Studios, advising fast-growing startups and Fortune 500s, all while leading multiple ventures at once. I've seen firsthand how even the best executives get buried in meetings, lose strategic visibility, and burn out just trying to keep up. That's why I built the AI Executive Coaching Program, the same frameworks and tools that I've used in my own work to make it more meaningful, better leveraged, and more impactful. We're helping leaders in global businesses get hours back every week, turning chaos into clarity and operating with more leverage than ever before. This isn't theory. This is about identifying the traits you need to unlearn, the tasks pivotal to your success, and the tools that can be built into workflows to optimize your capabilities every day. From transforming meeting scripts into transcripts, into action plans, and spotting performance patterns you can't see on your own, we're upgrading the way executives lead. If you want to scale without losing your edge, let's talk. You'd be surprised how quickly you can lead at a whole new level.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode and it greatly supports our podcast. Welcome to the Unlearn podcast. Today we're joined by a true expert in humour-centred leadership and agile HR strategy, Theresa Cantwell. Now, Theresa is a strategic HR consultant and a director of GTS HR Consulting, where she offers bespoke, data-informed solutions to empower organizations as they transform, or as she likes to say, grow with grace. She's held pivotal roles in leading recruitment at Microsoft's European headquarters, shaping their strategies at Equal Experts, but it was at ThoughtWorks where we first met. In fact, she was the hiring manager when I first joined the company, at the moment that we were going from a group of ragtag consultants to a professionalized organization ready to scale. Her services and skills go from organizational design, workforce planning, executive search, succession planning, and employee engagement. But more than that, she brings measurable impact and satisfaction, retention, and performance to the teams that she worked with. So whether you're curious about building a first-class people cultures, designing HR teams, navigating growth strategies as a business that's hitting scale, Theresa brings a wealth of wisdom and warmth to such conversations. So today we're going to hear about how she's helping many of these organizations grow with grace. I'm looking forward to having the conversation. Here's Theresa to share her story as we start. It's not often I get people on the show who actually hired me. That's actually kind of fun in itself. So yeah, you found this lost and lonely soul floating around London in whatever 2010 and managed to get me a job. So thanks for that.
You're very welcome.
Right. And so as people look across your career, you've had like a fascinating career, right? You've started off helping people in talent sourcing. You've worked at huge companies like Microsoft. We met obviously at ThoughtWorks when it was in a great sort of stage and a great growth spurt. You've worked for a number of these businesses that were at a point where they were shifting from, you know, a group of people sort of doing crazy stuff to actually professionalizing and becoming a scaled business. And you've done this everywhere. You've done this in Europe. You're doing this in Asia now. I'm sure many people are sort of like looking at your career going, all right, how does somebody do that? But if you look back on your own career, was there sort of like a turning point where maybe at the moment it didn't mean like a lot, but in retrospect you're like, you know what, that was sort of a seminal moment that helped me figure it out, you know, what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I think it was back in Microsoft, and the European Development Centre was started there, and I was part of the recruitment team that built it up. And the moment for me was when I walked into the canteen and saw a group of people, all individuals I had hired in that canteen as a team, having lunch, having the crack. And I was like, okay, like I know I wasn't the person who made that happen, but I certainly was a catalyst to that. And up to that point, I was a very good technical recruitment consultant, but then to see that in action, I thought maybe a career in HR is for me. And I'd resisted HR for a long time because I felt it was like the issues and tissues team. It's the employee relations, it's the grievances, it's the enforcement of policy. And I was having too much fun growing things and meeting new people and forming connections and being that connective tissue. So when I moved to London, I stuck with talent acquisition or recruitment, as you want to call it, for a while, and then moved into HR. So now I specialize in helping founders grow gracefully. So to move from maybe 20, 25 people, put in the processes and procedures, and enable them to have a graceful, growing, robust company. And that's what I love. And up to that point in Microsoft, I really just thought it's just acquisition. It's fine. We get these people in, but to see them there at that lunch table, having fun, this disparate group of people, that was when I became very invested in building culture.
It's great to hear you say that. As someone who, I guess, a few years down the track, you had created that experience for people like myself and others in ThoughtWorks. And, for many people who may be familiar or not with ThoughtWorks, it certainly was one of the most unique cultures I ever worked in. It definitely, you had a huge amount of agency. In many ways, you almost felt like you had too much, that many people could feel lost because there were no
Mm,
managers. There were an office with just tables, and you didn't know if you were sitting beside a CEO or you were sitting beside a grad who had just started. And
yeah,
again, it was a fascinating and unique culture at that time, where the business, as you said, was going through this juncture from having a group of great, capable people, but professionalizing into a business that was going to scale at that stage from a few hundred to what maybe it's like 10,000 now at this point.
mm,
And it was very interesting, again, to go through an experience where even meeting you at the time, where you were explaining, what's unique about this place, what's different, and it's not like, was I right or wrong? It's just, you were very good at laying out, like, this is the situation here, and how that is going to sit with me to find if I was the right person, never mind, was this the right place for me? Which I felt was very unique. In many other of those scenarios, I always felt like I was sort of in this position where I was like, oh, please, I don't have a choice in this.
yeah,
It's more like, oh, if I'm lucky, they might pick me. But you were very good at and unique in many respects to me about positioning, like, this is what this place is about. How are you going to fit into that place if that's the right fit for you? And that was very, very unique, because what I found is I probably was sitting at a table, like you've described, many years later, with a bunch of people that I know you had helped bring into the company, having some of the best times, doing the best work, and because they had a base set of principles and values, I think, that made them comfortable with uncertainty, a willingness to pursue excellence in their work, open to feedback, even if it went against their sort of viewpoint. A lot of the characteristics that the company was really trying to create as values and live them, and I think that was fascinating, as you're describing it, the experience I had, because that's what came to fruition. So how do you do that? How do you help people understand that? And what did you have to unlearn as you went into this world of, rather than just, as you say, talent acquisition, to then building that culture, to building the processes around it, so the company and the people who joined had a greater success rate because they both knew what they were going into, if that makes sense.
thank you for explaining that. And I didn't realize I had such an impact, but I'm pleased that I did because that was my intention. I think it goes back to my original training, which was as a teacher. And as a teacher, we were told, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you've just told them. because you can't over communicate, right? And if you respect those candidates who, are all talented individuals, we're going to go in with positive intent. I need to set them up for success. So in your case, and with other candidates, I hope I've done this anyway, is to tell them what to expect and to be very forthright about what this company is, what we expect, what the interview process is going to be like. So they have the opportunity then to withdraw. If they're not interested, that's fine. But then once they get involved in the process, my job is to support them. And then as my maturity and my career developed, I realized that talent acquisition was actually only part of it. And I moved into engagement because I felt that on the talent side, recruitment's like the shop window into the company. You're selling the dream. Then I got interested in what happens when these people start. How do we make sure that what we tell them at the acquisition stage is actually the truth going in? So then my career into HR started from an engagement point of view. So being an employee or a staff engagement specialist, which also involves speaking with the client. Going back to what you experienced, I feel that HR's job in a way is to be the connective tissue between all parties in the company. So to form those connections, make people feel like they know what's going to happen, set the expectations, but check all the time. And again, that lends itself well to that agile principle of inspect and adapt. And
Yeah.
you can't over communicate in that way. So I think that's probably what you've experienced, and that's the principle by which I work is I want to feel when I go to bed at night that I can sleep soundly because I've treated people well. And that's not a Pollyanna thing. It's actually, I want to feel that people will have a good experience. I want to tell them what's going to happen as far as I know, but then to follow that through right to the end, the whole employment life cycle to make sure that all those checks and balances are in. So yeah, I don't feel like recruitment should be a surprise. It's the shop window to the company. You should treat people well. You should, get back to every single candidate. And for those that you bring into the system, no tricks. Tell them what to expect, set them up for success. And then when they're in the company, make sure that you check in with them on a regular basis that what you've sold them is actually the truth.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear you describe that sort of life cycle, customer journey, whatever way people might want to, or you certainly equate it in that manner, right? Because I do, again, the shared context we have of working in ThoughtWorks is it was a place that people got lost sometimes,
Mm.
especially if they had come from, I would say, more bureaucratic, more structured cultures, which was actually the candidates we were trying to hire to grow at the time, right? We needed people who had worked in professional organizations to learn what that looks like. But many people, I remember sitting down, I was still a newbie, but I still remember sitting on my first day going, how do I book a holiday? And someone just said, oh, you just take it. I'm like, well, what do you mean I just take it? Do I have to report into someone? And they're like, no, unless you're on a project, you just take time off. And to me, that was like, what the hell? Like, surely I have to tell as a grown up that I'm not going to
Yeah.
be going to school today, and in some respects, for me, that was like, wow, that's a really curious method, but it resonated with me and my values. Where I definitely saw examples where people needed a little bit of structure and support, and sometimes it wasn't there, and it was very hard, and I've experienced it in different ways, like either as joining companies, but certainly in recent years where I've been trying to start companies. And we're in a very interesting spot with this venture studio that we're building, where the
Mm.
studio itself is an entity. We've got a number of staff that work for the studio. And then we have the companies that entity or studio is creating, again, which are sort of micro versions of themselves. So there's a culture that not only is created in the studio, but has to propagate into the startups. And ultimately, the startups have to create their own culture to be successful and essentially go and succeed in whatever manner they want. So I'm sure I'm making tons of mistakes doing this. So as someone
Yeah.
who is sort of going through this process with founders or companies that are hitting these junctures, right? You said this idea of when you get to sort of roughly 20 people, when it's not just the people you knew who started it and then the person they invited to come join the company, right? Where you're actually getting
Yeah.
to this sort of third degree of whatever step away. What are some of the things that I and other founders should be thinking about to help them start to build this, professionalized growth engine and culture? Really, that's going to be really important for them if they're going to get to the next sort of milestone of what they're aiming for.
I think if you start thinking about people and culture at the 20-ish mark, that's good because then you're being intentional rather than being reactive. So I think a lot of companies, they wait for someone to burn out, they wait for an employment tribunal, they react, and then they say, let's get the HR person in quick, right? Whereas you get intentional about this, and I would say that you speak with the people and culture specialists, whoever you engage, about your exit strategy. Like, what's your plan for the company? Because people strategy is not isolated from the business, right? So, being clear about what your business is about. If you haven't yet done a mission, vision, and values exercise, do it soon. If you've got co-founders, I would say prepare for conflict. So you do some shadow planning with your co-founders. What does bad look like? If I'm having a bad day, if I'm stressed out, what does that look like? And expect that from your co-founders as well as founding members of the group, so that you're talking about like and creating some understanding and avoiding that kind of fundamental kind of attribute error where somebody does something wrong, oh, they're a bad person, right? So I think having those crucial conversations at the beginning is important. Also understanding that leaders will change. I'll give you an anecdote. I worked with one company that was growing so rapidly, and one of the founders took he was personally proud of meeting every single person that started, but then it just wasn't practical anymore. He couldn't. So one day he walked um, into the board meeting and just got really upset because he said, there are people walking around here in this company. I don't know who they are. Who are they? And he was so cross about it. And I think that's one thing to prepare for, is that you're going to change as well. There's things that you will not be able to do that you used to do. You're going to have to delegate and plan for delegation. Plan for succession planning as quickly as possible. I think that's a priority as well, because the people who've been with you on that journey, they're going to grow as well. Or they might not. They might tire of the company, or the company might tire of them. So think about your succession planning early. Prepare for delegation. I would say also as well to have your hiring bar agreed upon. What do we expect? Like, do a Moscow. What's your must-haves, your should-haves, your could-haves, and you're definitely not. Um, have a decision-making framework agreed as well. And your people and culture specialist will be able to help you with this. And I would say as well to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, the complexity. That's what leadership's about. It's about managing complexity and being comfortable with it and realizing that you're going to change with it. And success is scary. On one hand, it's something that people want, and they want to be successful, they want to make money, they want the company to grow. But when the company grows, it can be quite terrifying. So to have that support structure around you is incredibly important as you grow.
All right, these are all great points, right? And I've written down three that just maybe they're just recency bias that I need to be aware of right now.
Okay.
But there's a couple that I would just love you to elaborate a bit more.
Hmm.
Shadow planning is very interesting to me. Can you just explain a little bit about what that is? Because I've been in scenarios. Um, One of the companies I first started, me and the other co-founders were like, we were so excited to start this business. We all quit our
Yeah.
jobs. Well, I
Hmm.
certainly quit my job, moved to a new country, and literally within 2 weeks, I knew the business was not going to work. And sadly, we all came to that conclusion. And it was one
Yeah.
of the saddest, but it was the right thing to do. Um,
Hmm.
And part of me wishes that we had done that 3 weeks before we found out. So talk a little bit about this idea of shadow planning, because I think it's important, and just help people understand it and why people will want to do it.
So all of us have a shadow side. So there's no getting away from it. There's good and bad parts of everybody. And I think with shadow planning, you explore the dark side of yourself, but also the dark side of the situation you're in. Because like what you were saying about that company you created with your co-founders, that was an entity in itself. And you were all terribly excited. What if you took a hard look at yourselves and said, okay, when I get stressed or when things go wrong, this is how I act. But also, this entity we've created, if it goes wrong, how could it go wrong? What are the ways in which it could go wrong? Perhaps a pestle analysis might help you on this one. But you'd look at all aspects of it and think, well, what could go wrong and what would we do in this case? And then it's like confronting the dark side and embracing it is shadow planning and being unafraid to talk about it. What could go wrong? And at least then you might have a plan B, or you might have like just not quit your job and maybe tested it out a little bit. Uh,
Right, right on. No, you're right on.
yeah,
Yeah, and that was essentially the example, right? 2 weeks in, we had a big contract that was going to launch the business. It got cancelled,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then
Your
that was
anchor
it.
client sorted.
We were in that sort of, desperate situation of, right now we've no customers, we've not built any sort of sales pipeline. Like, what are we going to do? Really, really good. The other thing you talked about, and I think it's one of the things, especially in the early stages of companies, it can feel almost gut wrenching. Is people leave, and that's
Yeah,
okay. It's part of the sort of story. Some people are great at certain parts of a company's journey. Some people are not. Some people just, their, as you say, their ambitions change. But it can feel like, you're losing a limb, because especially in the
mm,
early stages, it's such an intense experience. When, one of the team sort of goes, you're sort of like going, oh my God, we've no person who does, customer success anymore. We've no person who really understands how to do whatever engineering, or and it can feel like a huge jolt to the momentum of the company. So how do you help teams sort of, first of all, reckon with that, but then also like just start to think about actionable strategies they can take, and to sort of just accept that that's going to happen, and you're still going to move forward.
okay. Um, so there's two bits. There's the shadow planning, right? So confronting the idea that this person may leave. They may leave of their own volition, but also unexpected things happen, right? Um, The second is succession planning and to be unafraid of it. Sometimes when you start succession planning, people are so, like they're happy in the role, they're enjoying it. They've got a title, maybe they've grown that company with you, and that's their narrative. We started out in the garage and look at where we're at. But then the minute you're talking about, well, how could we, what do we need to know in order to replace you should you leave? It's quite stark.
Yeah.
So I would say this shadow planning, like that any one of us, we're all fallible. We could all leave for whatever reason and to have a plan and to confront that. And the other thing is actual succession planning. And in order to do succession planning, identify the kind of role. Now, that role, whatever that person could do, they could be an amazing individual, in which case you might have to split it into three. They do three people's jobs, right? Get that person actively involved in succession planning, get them involved in identifying people within the company and within the market. Hopefully you have a recruiter or a talent scout within your company. Get them talking to people. I think one of the successes of a growing company is by having a talent pipeline. You mentioned sales pipeline earlier. It's imperative that companies also have talent pipelines. They're constantly talking to people in the market. They're making no promises to anybody. They're just finding out who's around, because the succession planning has to be intentional rather than being surprised.
Yeah, it's almost one of these things that I've noticed a little bit sometimes is when you have people, and it's the earliest beginnings of the company, everyone's excited, this is the best thing
Mm,
ever. And this sort of, even sitting down to have the conversation and say, right, we need to start planning for almost like how you're going to replace yourself or how you're going to
Yeah.
scale yourself. And, you know, I often see a reaction which is sort of non-action,
Mm.
where some people just don't do it. They won't even entertain the idea, like asking them, right, if you have to build a team, what's this team going to look like? It's actually sort of in many ways, later it's become almost like a red flag for me if I'm saying to an individual, I need you to start thinking about building out your team. Their inaction is almost like a signal that they're not willing to let go of stuff. They're not willing to evolve. They want to own all these things and behaviors. And it is kind of a contrary conversation to be having when everything's going so good and you're almost, people can tend to interpret it as, well, why are you trying to replace me? Or
Mm.
why are you giving someone else a responsibility that I thought implicitly was mine? You know, like, so how do you help people with that? Because I've seen it go, you know, bad ultimately when, because everyone feels like, you know, that it's momentum and we're moving and it's great. And it's almost like then there's this sort of, you know, sense sometimes that people are like, well, hang on a sec, what am I doing wrong? Why do we need to talk about having backup or scenarios where I'm not doing this thing that I'm doing right now? So how do you help
Mm.
people sort of embrace that? Because there's definitely a bit in startup culture where people like the
Yeah.
startup because they have so much agency, and yet when you professionalize, I feel like you have to, you know, you have to make those trade-offs. So how do you help people go through that process?
I think by being like empathize with their situation, right? Like I said to you earlier, a narrative builds up. You become the hero in your own story. You know, it's a good conversation at a dinner party. You know, I'm the co-founder of this, or I'm the CTO of that, and you know, it's great. Um, so try and understand what it is that they like right now. Also try and understand where they want to go, the current pressures of the job, because if you're still doing the same role and the company's growing and you haven't delegated, you're likely to suffer from burnout. And burnout is unpleasant. I've been there myself. It has a detrimental effect on everybody, and present those scenarios as well, and also to basically put an alternative vision of the future there for them. Like, given your skills, given your abilities, what could you be doing when this company doubles in size? There is, I think it's Heraclitus said that, you know, you never get into the same river twice, right? So what you are now is not what you're going to be when this company doubles. So let's have a look at where you want to be and what bits of your role we can talk about giving to others. So the first step may be delegation, not exactly succession planning, right? So I'm not asking for you to talk about replacing yourself, but let's look at the aspects of your role that perhaps could be delegated initially and then help you grow. And at that point, the whoever, you know, if it's a leader or a founder and they're wrestling with that, an executive coach could be very useful for them.
Yeah.
Somebody external who's not in the weeds, who can help them see what's happening.
Yeah, no, they're good advice, you know, because it is an interesting juncture, you know, where I've seen us do it well, even in the studio. I've seen us
Mm.
do it badly, and it is amazing when you help unlock people's, sometimes they're blind spots, but also they actually get even better and more enjoyable. And I like the way you're creating a very specific moment in the future of saying, well, what are you doing when this company doubles in size, specifically in the
Mm.
next 12 months? I remember I had Don Pierce on the show. He was an early joiner at Atlassian. And I remember him sitting down and sharing his own story as Atlassian was going through this hyper growth. And his boss sat down to him and said, Dom, it's not about, you know, the company is not going to double in 12 months. It's going to quadruple. So you're going to
Yeah.
have four times the things to do that you're doing now. Um, and I don't know how you're going to be able to do that. So I want you to go and think about it and what that looks like. And I remember it was him saying that sort of giving the person the algebra equation to go off and try and make sense of was actually the best thing that happened to him, because instantly he was like, well, I can't work. I'm already at, going at 110%. Doing that 4 over is burnout. So I've
Yeah.
got to recalibrate and reset here, So I think that's a great mechanism you're sharing there, is especially when you're dealing with technical people who are great at what they're doing, but you're giving them a problem to solve that has sort of a success metric around it, rather than just you need to change because the company's changing. It's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're going
No,
to double.
no.
So you're going to have to do twice what you're doing now in the next 6 months. Now, what does that look like? Because the answer is not, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Like, no one would say that, right? So, yeah, no, it's another great tip. All right, and then you sort of started to talk about succession planning, and instantly I'm thinking about, a billionaire's family in New York and a great TV
Yeah.
series that I loved watching. But like
Oh,
everyone vying for the CEO job, and like, how am I going to get that to pick me? But talk to us a little bit then about some of the things, because it is important. And it's a thing, again, when you are leading these companies, you're so busy like trying to build up the customer base, establish the brand, operationalize the company. And that's why sometimes when you have these sort of what feel like existential threats, where somebody who's a key member of that team, especially from the beginning, sort of puts their hand up and says, well, I'm done. I'm going
no.
somewhere else. Oh no, we actually, you know what? I'm good now. This part of the journey was all I wanted. I'm happy to sort of, go do something else. And it is a shock at that to the system. So when should this notion of succession planning just start to be something that's in at least the horizon and vision of the founding group or the CEO or whoever it is? And then what are some of those first small steps that they can start to think about how they might do this? So as the company starts to go from 20 to 40 to 100 and so forth.
Um, I would say as soon as possible. Once you realize that the company has got some traction, then you need to be doing some future proofing, and that part of that is succession planning. So thinking about not replacing you. I mean, I know it's hard when you're growing, like because of that narrative that you've built up about yourself and all the rest. But if you depersonalize it and think about like how things are going to change for when the company gets bigger, then there's aspects of that role that you could delegate internally, and then eventually you might want to replace what you do entirely. Like, so if you're the CTO currently, in 5 years' time, perhaps, or even in a shorter amount of time, you might want to be maybe more of a CEO or something like that, let someone else take over. Um, so I think in order to manage it nicely, is delegate aspects of the role first. Make sure that you document what's going on. I know that's quite anathema to some companies because, when you're a scrappy startup, anything to do with like process and documentation is terribly boring. But do it. Um, so that it feels like you've got agency and control. So when you've delegated parts of it, check in with the person you've delegated with, make sure it's working well. And once you've got a cadence of succession planning going, I would say while the company's in hypergrowth, is to check in every quarter to see how things are going, right? And be adaptable and make sure things are changing. But if you do decide to delegate, document, check in frequently, over communicate, and be aware that things will change. Because if that leadership has a level of self awareness and trust between them, that will build mutual awareness because we all grow relative to each other. So personal growth is actually relative to the people you're around so that the team itself grows. So see it as growing pains is my suggestion, but do it and document it and check in on a frequent basis.
Yeah, I like the idea of depersonalizing it first of all, right? I
Mm.
think that's certainly a mistake I've made before, where I almost use the words like, how do we need to think about if you're not here? And instantly
Yes.
people are like, What do you mean if I'm not here? What are you talking about? Like,
Mm,
am I being fired? Is there something happening I don't know about? And it again, it creates this unnecessary or certain or unintended confusion, right, and anxiety, where this idea again, as you're phrasing it, of let's think about how this business is growing, or what it looks like in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years.
mm.
Let's think about you and what you're doing in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years. That again is a great question to sort of be asking, because it's a healthy question to be asking of
Yeah.
a business that's growing, right? It's a diligent question to be asking, where it's not about me, it's about the growth of this company. And I think that's, again, it desensitizes these things, but it shows diligence about what we're trying to do. And again, like these processes you're sharing of doing it. And it's easier to do than ever, because you can just talk to a transcription for 20 minutes about your process, and then you can get GBT to transcribe it and write it up as a doc. So why not be doing it is what I would say.
Oh, I love AI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the best. So for you then, looking forward on that idea, do you see people and culture changing as these new technologies are really starting to come into the realm? How are people using it to build better companies, to have stronger cultures? What are some of the things that you're seeing when you're getting the best out of humans and technology?
I think it would be remiss of me to say that at the moment HR is not getting a beating. It is, right? If you look at what's happening in the news, especially say in the Western world, HR is getting a bit of a beating. So I would say that HR themselves need to be supportive amongst themselves and realize that HR needs HR every now and again. On the positive front, I would say a lot of the repetitive stuff can be done with AI, right? And that the value that HR can add is in the relationship building and being the connective tissue in the company. So I think that behoves HR to be more commercial in their mindset, to be more aligned with the business strategy, and to have constant conversation. So I think it's going to be more of an engaging role in the future. It's going to be more commercial. I think it'll be more intentional rather than back office. I certainly, now that I'm in Hong Kong, I've just a general sense that HR tends to be more seen as an administrative function, which I think is a bit of a mistake because it can be a very important strategic driver. So I'm very hopeful about the future of HR. I think that AI will enable us. The caveat being is that the processes need to be well documented before you throw AI at it. Like AI is not the answer; it is a tool.
Yeah, like I
Yeah,
was
and I think yeah.
one of the companies I was been working with. The one of the leaders actually of the adoption is the chief people officer. She's brilliant, and but one of the things that she was like, once they turned it on, the first thing everybody started searching was how much everybody else is getting paid in the company and trying to access all the HR documents to understand. Which again, luckily enough, they had preempted some of this and they had sort of protected what people could view or not. But it was again interesting to see what were the first things people did when they could suddenly have access to all the company's data. Is like, yeah, I'm going to find out what Barry's, how many holidays he has and what his pension plan looks like, and it's like
Hmm.
hilarious, if not somewhat disappointing that that's what we do with all this new technology when we get it.
Humans are humans. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Listen, it's been really fun to hear your stories. I'm super grateful of someone who's had the chance to work with you and experience, what you can create, which is amazing. I'd highly
Thank you.
recommend anybody out there who is at that stage of thinking about, you're hitting that juncture where you realize, you're not just hiring your friends anymore, you're actually building a robust organization. Highly recommend that they reach out and get in touch with you. It's great work that you're doing both now, not only in Europe, but in Asia and all over the world. So thank you very much for sharing that, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Barry. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
Please consider leaving a rating or a review as it helps others find our podcast. For more episodes and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com and we'll see you on the next episode.